As much as we think we know about the blockchain industry, the truth is that we've seen nothing yet. Even from the countless hours of research, we've still barely just scratched the surface of the iceberg. From governments, large enterprises, to small and medium enterprises. What we've seen from the regulated networks we regularly discuss here, such as Quant, Hadera, Casper, Ripple, Render, and many others, have all already been really eye-opening. But take a second to think. If this is everything we already know, meaning this information has to be at least public of some level, then what do we not know? The Bank for International Settlements, Google, IBM, Disney, the United Nations, CERN, the list goes on. Each of these giant establishments I just named have all started positioning themselves for the digital shifts in distributed ledger technology we're soon to witness, many of which align directly or overlap with the networks we regularly discuss. So what really is underneath the iceberg of truth? Well, that's what we're here to find out. I'm Tokenicer, and since 2020 I've put in well over 5,000 hours of research in the blockchain and crypto space. I'm here to bring you only the highest quality deep research from the depths of the blockchain industry. While you're here, don't forget to check out Tokenicer.network for my free email newsletter of more content around the blockchain space, in addition to all my content platforms linked right in one spot, from my Twitter threads, Medium articles, Spotify podcasts, and so much more. And before we get back to it, I just gotta remind you guys real quick that I'm not a financial advisor, and therefore please don't take anything you hear or see from me as any form of financial or investment advice. But without any further delays, let's dive right down the rabbit hole. There's two sides to people in this industry. Those that think crypto will be some magical utopia that frees us from the modern hierarchy of our world and displace our global economy. Then there's the group that believes blockchain is simply another form of technology, and while yes, a disruptive one with lots of room for innovation, it's simply a new means to an end. Just like any other technology, blockchain will be used by governments and corporations as a way to 1. Enhance efficiency in their current solutions, and 2. Bring new solutions enabled by the technology. If you've been here for some time now, then much like myself, you probably fall in the latter camp. And this is kind of what we've seen with the adoption of blockchain over the years anyways. We've seen the banking sector adopting blockchain for testing and now looking at bringing MVPs of CBDC environments for a more seamless, enhanced financial system. Supply chains are testing digital twins and digitalizing documents through the solution brought by NFTs. Entertainment and media is also using NFTs as a form of verification and ownership of specific products. The copyright industry is also doing a similar thing, as NFTs can provide immutability and transparency of licenses and patents. Energy companies are starting to use blockchain aspects of on-chain data for immutable records of energy usage and generation. Financial markets are looking to tokenize their assets on-chain for instant settlements and clear data on where assets are moving and the ownership of them. Identities are starting to use blockchain to ensure verification and authenticity of one's credentials. The list really goes on, but I don't think anybody is trying to listen to me ramble on about how blockchain can be adopted by different industries. So let's just carry on. So this is all we know about the industry. But have you ever taken a moment to stop and think about all that we don't know? Whether it's NDAs, top secret government work, or just development in the pipelines, what's really going on behind the chain? Well, we know for a fact that Quant Network's solution Overledger was used in the Bank for International Settlement and Bank of England's CBDC concept Project Rosalind. This layered architecture using APIs has since inspired other CBDC projects to do the same. Keep in mind that there were also other external parties in the test, including the Bank of Canada, Barclays, MasterCard, Amazon, R3, and many others. All of which are already very well established and respected names within the industry. So what must be going on behind the scenes here? Because to be a solution for the BIS's CBDC projects, you're not only going to need an applicable and usable technology. You could argue that's the easy part. You'll also need to be extremely well connected in the top level of finance to even be considered as a solution for the BIS. Luckily for Quant, we know they've worked in various parts of the financial world through SIA, LackChain, and the Digital Pound Foundation, paired with, of course, the team's background. But is this really what led Overledger to be selected? After all, this is the central bank of central banks we're talking about. The barrier for entry is pretty high. So if they chose to use Overledger for both key management and API interoperability for Project Rosalind, and having them say the project was a success, it really does make you wonder, how many other CBDC projects will they be integrating this framework for, since they had marked this up as a successful demonstration? And that's not even factoring in the two standards around blockchain Quant has founded in ISO TC 307 through Gilbert Verdian's time in the Australian government, and Secure Asset Transfer Protocol, SATP, founded by Quant and MIT, which is now formed as an official working group with the Internet Engineering Task Force. And so it really makes you wonder, what else must Quant be connected to for them to be working at the upper echelon of finance meeting blockchain and the universal standards underpinning the utility? Casper Network has openly stated that they have countless NDAs, over 50 in fact, some of which being Fortune 500 companies. And while obviously since these are non-disclosure agreements, we can't get the full story on them, at least for now. But from the work they've done with some of the projects in their ecosystem, it does kind of make you think who they might be. For example, IPWE is on Casper's public network, but they also use IBM's Weaver for interoperability into Hyperledger Fabric to bring the public and private benefits of blockchain all together. Ariadne and Nucleus Finance are two fintech solutions on Casper revolved around financial contracts and open banking respectively, both of which, along with Casper Labs, is participating in the Actus Foundation for standards around finance, especially with the inevitable integration of blockchain technology meeting finance, which of course lines up a lot with ISO TC68, ISO TC 307, and ISO 20022. Well, Actus is actually a registration management group member of the ISO 20022 committee. And with Casper and their applications being some key members in the Actus Foundation, and let's not forget, they're the chosen public chain by BSN China to be deployed as Chengdu's public blockchain. We of course know China's stance on crypto from the past few years. So what is it that has allowed Casper, which fundamentally is just another layer 1 blockchain, to be working at the forefront of the DLT industrial revolution with names like IBM, Hyperledger, ISO, and even the China part of BSN? Ripple and XRP have been operating in this space for a decade now, over twice as long as many blockchain projects in this space. They've seen it all, from onboarding large banks around the world such as SBI, Santander, CIBC, HSBC, and many others to begin testing and using their banking solutions, to even being sued by the SEC, and of course, from what it looks like now, making the SEC look pretty foolish. But with all that said, what really must be going on behind Ripple for them to be so highly touted as one of the most recognized names in this space? And for Ripple to be the only project directly operating in this space listed under ISO 20022's registration management group list. It's clear that there's likely a lot connecting behind Ripple that 99% of us don't and possibly won't ever get to see. But by piecing the dots together, realizing they've stood strong as a company for 10 plus years now, with even former members of the US Senate, White House, Congress, and US Treasury all starting to get involved on Ripple's board of directors, it would definitely pique one's curiosity as to what's getting these big names having worked at arguably the top of the nation decide to join Ripple suddenly. Now let's just look at Hadera's governance council for a second, and I really mean look at it. How many of these companies do you recognize or have at the very least heard of? I'd imagine most people's answers would probably be somewhere around at least 50%. Names like IBM, Google, Boeing, Ubisoft, Dell, and LG. These are recognizable for just about anybody these days. And of course, these are all governing members of Hadera, or in other words, each council member is committed to the network innovation, stability, and its continued decentralization. In fact, on Hadera's board of directors, there are 6 representatives currently holding significant positions at their respective companies that also serve on Hadera's board. The fact they gathered all these giant enterprises and institutions to collate on the hash graph is big enough in itself. But because of this, it really has to make you wonder what they're all talking about and building behind the scenes. Because realistically, I doubt these guys will just be validating on the hash graph and just that. In fact, we've seen names like Shinhan Bank, LG, and DLA Piper as some of the governance members that have gone a step above and begun publicly building and testing applications on Hadera. And I'd imagine that the odds of many others on the council doing the same thing in private is more likely than not. Morpheus Network is built of supply chain experts and brings a unique solution to the industry through introducing a technology-agnostic middleware rather than a blockchain network to move supply chain operations to, like we've seen with most blockchain solutions. And this has since seen the interest and adoption from the likes of the United Nations, International Chamber of Commerce, and even the US Department of Homeland Security. In 2017, the United Nations had created a paperless trading framework titled Model Law on Electronic Transfer Records, or MLETR for short. This has since been retitled to paperless trading for convenience purposes. And we've since also seen Morpheus Network be added to the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia Pacific, along with the International Chamber of Commerce's paperless trading database. In there, they state that Morpheus Network can be a solution to further enhance compliance and save time on traditional operations. Now, on top of this, Morpheus Network CEO and founder Dan Weinberger is also a masterclass instructor on paperless trading for the United Nations. So it kind of makes sense why Morpheus Network would be so highly touted in this aspect. And then of course, they've built out a supply chain digital twin with the US Department of Homeland Security. So when you put all this together, it really does look like Morpheus Network is a leader when it comes to digitalizing the global supply chain. And more importantly, it makes you wonder how else they're being seen and used by supply chain leaders around the world, given that names like the United Nations, World Customs Organization, and International Chamber of Commerce seem to all be behind this middleware solution as we're evolving to a digital supply chain. Render Network has been working with the biggest names in media and graphics since their parent company Iota was a thing. With their team and advisors, they're connected to companies and franchises like Star Trek, Star Wars, HBO, WWE, UFC, the US Department of Defense, Nvidia's Omniverse, and a whole lot of others. With many of these even investing, or better yet, using the technologies brought forth by Render to create the most realistic version of digital media we've seen. Both Google and Microsoft have also contributed their GPUs to strengthen the compute and render power of Render Network. And with all these big names essentially being at the forefront of media and graphics, again, it makes you wonder just who else might be using the Render Network, and maybe more importantly, how many different ways is the Render Network being used at the moment? The Energy Web Chain and Foundation were created by the Rocky Mountain Institute and Grid Singularity, alongside 9 other global energy leaders. These being Shell, TEPCO, Stedin, Engie, TWL, Elia Group, Centrica, Sempra, and Singapore Power. Each of these are either partially government-owned or at the very least a global leader in the sector. We've since also seen EnergyWeb collaborate and be used around the world as a global library for identities for clean energy assets, from electric vehicles, clean energy certificates, solar panels, and much more, all logged onto the EnergyWeb chain. And these aren't just small and medium enterprise solutions either, but through Shell Avela, which is their sustainable aviation credit registry, using the Energy Web Chain, we've seen names like BlackRock, Deloitte, American Airlines, JetBlue, and a long list of others begin to take notice, especially with the focus on ESG over the past few years. And so with a foundation like this built by energy leaders, why do you think they would all join forces to collaborate and build an ecosystem specifically focused on the transition to clean energy? Constellation Network has been working with the US Department of Defense since 2019 now. From their first SBIR contract secured back in 2019, to Phase 2 in 2021, to now the implementation stages of Iron Spider, and of course, everything at the military level has to remain super top secret because of, well, the nature of military and defense operations. So of course, with that said, you start wondering just how involved is Constellation Network and the Hypergraph with the Department of Defense? Because realistically, if you're going to be using a new cybersecurity framework to secure defense operations, wouldn't it make sense to deploy the solution to all mission-critical government agencies to ensure data security of top-secret national data at the highest level? XDC, much like Morpheus Network, has also been vetted by the United Nations and International Chamber of Commerce as a paperless trading solution, though they spend a little more focus on global trade finance. What we've seen publicly out of XDC's trade finance solutions in their applications like Inigio, which is for digitalizing trade documents, TradeFinex as a connector to all trade finance applications, TradeTech, which is focused on tokenizing securities and creating more access to liquid financial trade instruments for institutions, and then Impel, which is for creating ISO 20022 wrap messages sent through blockchains to fit the financial infrastructure standards. Each of these applications have been supported and backed by big names and institutions in China, the UAE, Singapore, UK, and trade organizations all around the world. So what is it exactly about XDC that has the world of global trade raving about them, and even having them as the only public blockchain solution in many trade-focused consortiums? It's got to be more than just having their platform be able to handle the scale of global trade finance. But I think it's likely that there's a lot of connections within the industry we're yet to see. And guys like Andre Casterman on the XDC team just prove my point further. As a veteran and leader in global trade like Andre is likely one of the few connectors to much of the success in trade finance that we've seen from XDC over the years. Stellar Lumens, while operating quite similarly to XRP, their core focus is on the other end of finance, which is banking the unbanked. If Ripple is seen as a solution to bring blockchain benefits to banking, then Stellar is like a solution bringing blockchain benefits to developing nations with less modern banking infrastructure. From the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees collaborating with Stellar to build a blockchain-based cash system to assist with the issues caused by the war in Ukraine, to the creation of WorldWire as a blockchain-based payment platform with and using IBM infrastructure toolings. These are no small feat by any means. On top of this, Brazil has publicly reported to be experimenting with CBDCs using the Stellar network, and even investment giant Frank Templeton tokenizing mutual funds on Stellar given their network's ease to tokenize value. With all this progress and adoption at the highest level of business and intergovernmental organizations, what kind of conversations about global financial inclusion focused on enabling to modern financial infrastructure is happening within the Stellar Development Foundation? Algorand has many pieces of public information to be excited about. From MIT professor and Turing Award winner Sylvia Macaulay being the brains behind not just Algorand, but the inventor of zero-knowledge proofs and verifiable random functions, which are technologies used in more blockchain networks and applications than you could count today. But some of their collaborations also include recording air quality on-chain with the largest nuclear research center, CERN, to being the chosen blockchain for both Italy's largest copyright agency and also the Bank for Italy itself. And if that wasn't enough, what about being the public chain for FIFA? To top it all off even further, some of the most highly ranked academias, just like MIT, along with names like University of Waterloo, Purdue, UC Berkeley, and many others, are all actively contributing academic research and development of distributed ledger technology and cryptography to the Algorand Foundation. So the institutional connections are there, along with the academic connections, especially with the level of respect Silvio has. But still, this is just what we see on the outside. To be working with CERN and the Bank of Italy, you're gonna need a little more than just strong academic research. Odds are there's a lot more about Algorand's connections beneath the iceberg that hasn't come to light yet. Alliance Block has partnered with the London Stock Exchange early on to bring regulated DeFi products to their institutional clients. Since then, the launch of their other services and modules has caught the eyes of Toronet, which works with the USAID, and even Crunchbase. What really is behind Alliance Block that we might not know, to have their solution being utilized by names like this? Because to bag the London Stock Exchange is a pretty big task in itself, let alone to now having established companies and agencies using your solutions for things like identity verification and a standard framework. And now finally, what about Iota? Not only is their network messaging standard compliant to ISO 20022 standards, but they're also working on complying to Object Management Group or OMG standards. OMG is a non-profit consortium of 27 countries and 230 organizations focused on technology standards at the government and enterprise level. Well, let me rephrase that, because Iota isn't just working on OMG standards, but the chairman and CEO for OMG standards is coincidentally also on the supervisory board of Iota. Just coincidentally, right? Like how IBM has also coincidentally used and name-dropped Iota in one of their patents too. Or how an IBM and Simons-led consortium coincidentally ran a whole workshop around Iota. There comes a point where you've got to ask yourself, how many times is it until it's not a coincidence? And of course, in this case, I was just being sarcastic. None of these are coincidences by any means, but rather calculated decisions at the highest level of business and standard integration. And so if these names are not just paying attention to Iota, but building standards within their network, you've really got to wonder who must be paying attention and who must be involved, because when it comes to global technical standards, it takes more than just one. So all of this is still just the tip of the iceberg on the secrets from the blockchain industry. As much as you now know about what's happening, you now also come to the realization at how much you really don't know. Because if all of this information is public, and we take a second to analyze the scale of it, then you could argue because of the closed competitive nature of many corporates and governments, what's behind the scenes is likely magnitudes larger than everything we just discussed. We all know how full-scale blockchain adoption and government or enterprise utility is no longer a matter of if, but a matter of when. But what if all that and more is already in the works behind the chain in secret? What secrets from the industry do you think are still being kept at bay? And what entities must be involved for the digital shifts of our future global economy? Let me know your thoughts below. And as always, if you enjoyed this breakdown, be sure to hit that like and subscribe while turning on that ringer to stay up to date. And while you're at it, don't forget to check out Tokenicer.network for my free email newsletter, in addition to all my other content platforms linked right in one spot. But as usual guys, be sure to stay safe and keep learning. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.